So I've got another auto repair project. Today we're going to be doing the rear right wheel cylinder on this 2002 Dodge Dakota. These trucks, at least this one in particular, has discs in the front but it has drums in the back. And so in the back, instead of having a caliper, there's what's called a wheel cylinder or a brake cylinder inside the drum that has little stems that push out against the ends of the brake shoes to apply them to the inside of the drum to slow it down. And as they age, sometimes they rust and start leaking. I started noticing lately that my brake pedal felt really squishy, and I bled the back brakes and they had a bunch of air in them. And I thought, okay, well maybe I just didn't do a good job bleeding it, or it's somehow gotten something in the system when I opened the cap or something. I opened the cap and the reservoir was empty, and I was suspicious. And so I filled it full, bled them. The brakes hardened up and felt fine. So I just thought it was some kind of a fluke. But then I let it set for 2 or 3 days, came back out, the reservoir was empty again. And since the brake pedal hardened up and felt fine that day, I was fairly certain that it wasn't a ruptured brake line, because usually when they rust out, it'll be very obvious. The pedal will just go all the way to the floor. You may even hear the fluid spraying out somewhere, and you'll be able to see it. If somebody else hits the brake pedal and you just look at the side of the vehicle, you'll see brake fluid running from somewhere. So usually if it's a ruptured brake line, it's pretty obvious. And the fact that these bled and hardened up for a day, and the fact that the brake lines themselves, at least at a glance, looked fine, had me pretty certain it was one of those back wheels, since they were the two that had air in them. And I'll go ahead and show you how I figured out what side it is. So the brake lines on this truck run down the driver's side down here. And this one had a bunch of air in it. This one over here did too. And so I got underneath them and I just started looking at the inside. And it becomes really obvious when you look at it. But if you look at this side, you can see there's all kinds of signs of moisture right there, up around where the brake line goes in, and down here. But you notice that it's not running down outside. It's just kind of leaking around where there's holes in the dust cover back here. So I would bet when we take this drum off, the shoes are going to be covered in brake fluid. Now the reason this is a problem is obviously safety. Air in your brake lines will compress, because fluids don't compress, but air will. And so if you have a hole somewhere else in your system, even though it's just that far side over there that has the problem, and there's still fluid in the line, especially to these front brakes, that doesn't matter, because there's now air in those brakes. And so what's going to happen is the air in the lines back here is going to compress before the fluid in these lines starts squeezing on those brake shoes. So one wheel having air in the lines will affect the rest of them. I can still stop a little bit, but I would, one, it's not good to run your brake cylinder, your master cylinder dry. And two, it's just not safe, especially if I had any amount of weight behind me or anything, like I'm planning on doing in a few days with the lawnmower and stuff. So we need to get this fixed ASAP. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to chock these front wheels, since we're on a slight rearward slope. I'll jack this wheel up, get this wheel tuck off, and take a look at it. So I just put it in neutral, let it rest against it with its own weight, and that way when I start lifting that wheel on that side, it's not going to come rolling backwards on me, because the emergency brake does not apply to the front wheels. It only applies to the rear. Now I did not set the emergency brake, because that would tighten up the shoes against these drums in the back, and I wouldn't be able to get that drum off, because the emergency brake actually uses a steel cable. It does not use the hydraulic lines. So the emergency brake will still function even if you have a ruptured brake line. But the emergency brake only applies to the rear wheels. So the only thing holding it right now is just the parking gear and the transmission, which also only applies to the rear wheels, one of which we're going to be lifting off the ground. Now this one wheel would probably be enough to hold it, and it would probably be perfectly safe. But I'd rather be safe than sorry. Chock the front wheels just in case it's so rigid that lifting that one picks up on this one. You don't want it to start to scoot under its own weight. Alrighty, so what we've got here, we've got some brake fluid, brake cleaner, and hopefully the correct part. I don't remember if this has the 11 point something inch shoes or if it's the 9 point something. but I made an educated guess that since it has the V8, it probably had the larger brake shoes in the back, so I got that one. If it's the wrong one, I can always just take it back to O'Reilly's. But I wanted to have one of them on hand so that if it was the right one, I could go ahead and get it taken care of instead of having to make multiple trips. I've got a rubber mallet and a regular hammer just in case, because there's a pretty decent chance that there's a lip formed on the inside of the brake drum at the edge of the brake shoes, so that when if we try to pull the drum straight off, it's probably not going to come. It might, since the cylinder's busted and the shoes can just go in willy-nilly. But if it does get hung, I just got this so I could whack it, kind of knock the shoes in a little bit to try to get the drum off of it. So let's get it raised up and get started. Since we're doing this on gravel and I'm using a roller jack, I need a piece of plywood to give the roller jack something to roll on. There we go. That's all we need. We don't need it plumb up in the air, we just need it to break contact. If your wheel's stuck on here, the farther north you live, the more likely it is to be the case. Just give it a swift kick. Now this is the part where I said this should slide off. Probably won't. Ah, look there. All that brake fluid lubricated it. And sure enough, you can see that all this in here is nice and wet, especially on these little rods and boots and stuff, because that's what it is. Fluid comes in the back side of this and then presses out on these rods, which presses out on the brake shoe here and forces it into the inside of the brake drum. And that's how your rear brakes are normally applied when you press the pedal. And the seals in these eventually go bad with age. Looks like it was on this end. Alrighty, so I'm doing this one-handed, but the way we measure what brake size we've got is the diameter of the drum. Now this wheel cylinder I bought was for the 11-inch version. I figured the V8 probably had the bigger brake shoes, and they probably put like the 9-inch on the 4-cylinder. But if we go from here to there, we're at 11 inches, so we got the right part. But as you can see here, we have to at least partially remove some components in order to get in here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to detach the brake line from the back side of it, and then we'll get started taking these springs off. There's several different ways you can do this. They make hooked screwdrivers that you can kind of get in here behind these with. One of my favorite things to do is just take a piece of 550 cord and tie a loop, say, around here and put a screwdriver through that, and that gives you a big surface to pull on for taking them off and putting them back on. And we don't need to take the whole rigmarole loose because we're actually going to be spreading the shoes out in order to get this out. I just need these two springs out of the way. Maybe the emergency brake cable, but I think we'll be all right since it's not applied. And just pull these shoes out somewhat and slide it out. All right, we need to go downward. There we go. Yeah, that feels real loose and I heard a click. Yeah, it's out. Okay. Alrighty. Alright, next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to brake clean the daylights out of everything. Not just because I don't want to get it all over me, but also because that's a lubricant, essentially. You'll have no brakes even once we replace this cylinder if you don't get this crud off your brakes. Especially the mating surface of the shoes. You also want to get the inside of the drum. Make sure it's good and clean. Now, let's get started. Taking this spring and this spring. Our e-brake cable feels loose enough. I'll probably be able to get it out without disconnecting that. I'll just take a little piece of 550 cord. Big enough to tie in a loop. We only need the one. We'll just thread it through here behind this spring. Tie a little square knot. Take a screwdriver, or 3/8 inch, we just used, anything. And just lay that forward a little bit. There we go. There we go. Leave that guy hooked where it's supposed to be. Okay. Will this guy spread out enough? Yeah. Now we've got a couple of bolts in the back side of this that go through the dust cover that secure it. Yep, 1/2 inch. I don't think the new one came with bolts, so we'll lay those on the leaf springs here for safekeeping. So now this one here should, let's compare with our new one. It may just be corrosion. Let's compare with our new one here. We've just got 2 bolts, bleeder, and the brake line input. So that's all we got. It's just a little stuck. Grab it right here. Let's see if I can't. There she comes. Just rust. There's the old one. We lost a boot, but you can see which end of it was the one leaking here. So now, let's take our new one, and it's going to go in this way. This one has lettering on top, but the bleeder screw goes on top. The incoming brake line is going to come in from slightly the rear and thread into here. So we need to remove this feller. We're going to bleed it after we're done. And these 2 holes are what the bolts are going to thread into. I just noticed something too. This new one didn't come with the little paws, little followers, which means I need to retrieve those. Clean them up a little bit maybe. There we go. Alrighty, so I've got the brake shoes sort of spread out. This is going to sit sort of in here, sort of like that. And it's got these little paws, and this is actually what presses the brake shoes out and lets them come back in. And you see how they've got these little slots on them? They're going to go into these square slots on the brake shoes, and then the sides of these are going to sit on either side of the top and bottom of the little back plate of the brake shoe. And that keeps them from slipping off during operation. There we go. Just like that right there. And then this guy should go here. This guy should go here. These don't have to be super tight. They just have to be, you know, just snug them. The bolts are small enough that if you try to go too tight, you'll strip them out. There we go. Now we have to make sure that this little thing here starts straight. Push in and turn it backwards, and hopefully I'll feel a click. Got there, yeah. I think I got it right there. When you get to the end, you don't have to strip it. Just snug it and then kind of bump it a little bit. All you got to do is seal it against fluid. You go too hard, you might strip it, snap it. All right, so if in the process of doing all of this and you take your e-brake cable loose to get into things easier, there are some small parts down here that may fall out of whack. So if they do, this is how they go together. You have this little shim that sits behind here. It has a slightly larger part of this cylinder that it sits on specifically, and when the springs are all on here, the e-brake cable itself will hold it where it's supposed to be. The cable goes down, and there's a little metal thing with a groove here, but the cable lays along that groove and then comes down here, and there's a spring. There's a hook on one side of this spring. That hook goes into this. You see you've got this thing. This is for your adjuster. This is the adjuster. So the way it sits is you have this spring here that goes over this little peg behind it. Part of the spring lays here to apply tension. The other part comes around and in front and hooks here. This little foot sits against the adjuster. And the hook part, there's another piece of this that the hook end of this spring hooks onto to pull up on it and pull it into the adjuster. So let's go ahead and get them put back on here, okay, in the reverse order that we took them off. There we go. Got them. One of them anyway. Pull this guy up. Okay. And that should be everything all put back together. Now we've just got to fill it up and bleed them. We might want to take a look at the inside of our drum here. Maybe take a rag that doesn't have any oil on it and sort of just wipe it out a little bit. And stick our drum back on. Now I would normally put some anti-seize on the studs to keep the lug nuts from corroding onto them. But I've still got anti-seize on there from last time, so I'm not going to worry about it. Oh, we dropped a little bit. Alright, so the next thing to do is to put brake fluid in it. You probably can safely even overfill it because we're going to immediately start bleeding it and pushing fluid out. Alright, first thing we're going to do is we're going to get back under the truck. Now this shiny little fella right there, that's your bleeder screw. It's going to have a little rubber dust cover on it. You're going to pull that off, if I can do it while I'm recording here. Lay it to the side with the 10 millimeter, and what we're going to do, we're just going to crack it open, which doesn't mean remove it. You don't take it all the way out, you just loosen it, and then we're just going to let it sit and let it gravity bleed, because that fluid, by virtue of gravity and there being an opening here, will bleed itself to an extent. There we go. You loosen it a little bit and just let her sit for a while. Alright, we got no brake fluid still, so. Alright, hey babe, what I want you to do is I want you to press the brake pedal slowly all the way to the floor. When you get to the floor, stop and let me know, okay? And hold it there. We're at the floor. Okay. Pushed air out. Hold it right there. Don't move yet. Now, if she was to let off on this while that screw's open, it'll just suck air right back in the bleeder. All right, let off. All right. Okay. Don't do anything yet. Push it all the way to the floor and holler when you're at the floor. Slowly again? Yep. Because I don't want to get shot in the face with brake fluid. Oh, all right. We got fluid back here. All right, so now what I want you to do is I want you to give it 3 to 4 good hard pumps and hold it. Are you ready for me to let off? Yes. Ready? Yep. 1, 2, 3, 4, holding. Oh, there was the air bubble. All right, do it again. All right. 1, 2, 3, 4, hold. Oh. All right, do it again. I'm gonna go check the fluid. Don't move. You really leave it pushed in? No, you can let off right now. Oh, we still got plenty of fluid. Well, that one looked good. Go again.
1, 2, 3, 4, holding.
That's 2 in a row. That was good. I'm gonna do the other side now. And what I'm doing is I'm shutting that bleeder screw off before the stream finishes on purpose, because you don't want it to get an air bubble in the end of it and suck it back in maybe when you shut that off. You want to shut it off midstream so that you get all of the air out of it that you can. I'll go ahead and let it down. Coming down. All right, let's try them out. Engine's running, we're sitting in it. Oh, that's a lot better. That's way better, a lot harder. So now I've just got to clean everything up, put it all back together. So that was replacing the wheel cylinder on a 2002 4.7 liter 2-wheel drive crew cab Dodge Dakota with 11-inch brake drums. The process is basically the same no matter what vehicle you're doing it on. There may be differences in how the emergency brake works, and you may have a different size drum, but generally the process is you take the drum off, you unscrew the old one, put the new one in, and bleed everything. So now I've just got to go around and clean everything up and clean up the mess I made, laying tools and getting brake fluid all over everything. I've got shop towels and brake cleaner and things to break that up and get rid of it. But now I can actually use my truck to get some work done like I've been needing to for a few days now. But I haven't been sick, I haven't felt like it. But I felt a little better today, so I thought, you know what, it's a nice day. I need to get it done so that when I do feel good, I can get out here and get some stuff done. But that's it. If y'all have any comments, questions, concerns, suggestions, feel free to post them in the comment section below. And as always, this is Marcus out. Y'all have a good one.